Konoha on an ordinary autumn morning. Leaves drifting past rooftops. Shinobi jumping from beam to beam like it's nothing. And down in a cracked, half-forgotten alley near the edge of the orphanage district, a 4-year-old boy sits alone on a wooden crate, staring at a puddle, not playing in it, not splashing it, staring at it. Most people would walk right past him. Just another lonely kid, orange scarf too big for his neck, whisker-marked cheeks smudged with dirt. But if you leaned in close, if you actually watched his eyes, you'd notice something strange. He wasn't looking at his reflection. He was watching the ripples, counting them, timing how long it took each ring to reach the puddle's edge, then comparing it to the ring before it, like his mind was quietly building a rule nobody had taught him. This is Naruto Uzumaki. And in most tellings of this story, he grows up loud, impulsive, a little slow with his studies, hiding a broken heart behind an obnoxious grin. That version of Naruto is lovable. He is not this Naruto. Because on the night the nine-tailed fox was sealed inside him, something happened that nobody, not the third Hokage, not Jiraiya, not even Kurama himself, accounted for. The sealing process didn't just trap a demon's chakra inside a newborn's coils. It fused it, and in the collision between a baby's still-forming chakra network and the single densest, oldest, most information-rich chakra signature in the world, something in Naruto's brain didn't just survive the process. It rewired itself. By age 3, Naruto could recognize patterns other children couldn't see with a magnifying glass. By age 4, sitting on that crate, staring at a puddle, he wasn't seeing ripples. He was seeing wave mechanics. He didn't have the words for it yet, no 4-year-old does. But somewhere in that overclocked little mind of his, he was already building an internal language for how energy moves through the world. If you're wondering just how smart we're talking here, we're talking Naruto Uzumaki, at maturity, operating with a mind so far past genius that scientists in another world would need an entirely new scale to measure it. An IQ of 500 isn't a number that exists in real human terms. It's a way of saying, whatever ceiling you think exists for human thought, this kid doesn't have one. And he was about to spend the next several years of his life hiding that fact from literally everyone. Let's talk about why. You'd think a genius-level orphan in a village full of shinobi would be scooped up immediately, given tutors, fast-tracked into elite training. That's what happens in most stories like this. That's not what happens here. Because here's the thing about Konoha in those years. The villagers already feared Naruto. Whispered about him. Some flinched when he walked by, blaming him, unfairly, for a monster he never asked to carry. A 4-year-old boy can't understand geopolitics or seals or sacrifice. But he can understand a look. He can understand a mother pulling her child away from him at a market stall. And very quickly, tiny genius brain running 1,000 miles a minute, Naruto did the math. If people already treat me like I'm dangerous for something I can't control, what happens if they find out I'm different in another way too? So he made a decision. At 4 years old. A decision that would define the next several years of his life. He would hide it. Every single day, in his own head, Naruto built a second identity, a mask laid directly over his own mind. The loud kid. The prankster. The one who trips over his own feet and can't sit still in class. It wasn't an act, exactly. He did love mischief, did feel lonely, did crave attention in the ways a starved and neglected child does. But underneath that very real childhood pain, there was a second Naruto running calculations no one could see. Watching. Learning. Filing everything away. If you've ever underestimated someone because they seemed a little too silly, a little too much, hold on to that thought. It's going to matter a lot in the chapters ahead. Fast forward to Naruto at the academy. Irika Yumino stands at the front of the classroom, chalk in hand, walking a room full of 6- and 7-year-olds through the basics of chakra theory. 2 energies, he explains. Physical energy, from the body. Spiritual energy, from the mind and experience. Combine them, mold them, and you get chakra, the fuel behind every jutsu a shinobi will ever perform. It's a simple lesson. A foundational one. Every kid in that room nods along, half understanding, mostly just trying to survive the boredom of sitting still. Except one boy in the back, chin resting on his folded arms, expression carefully arranged into something between sleepy and not paying attention. Naruto isn't bored. Naruto is finding holes in Iruka's explanation the way a professional editor finds typos in a first draft. Because if chakra really is just two energies mixed together in fixed proportion, why do some shinobi burn through their reserves faster performing the exact same jutsu as someone else? Why does chakra exhaustion feel different from physical exhaustion, if it's partly physical energy to begin with? Why can chakra be sealed, stored, transferred, if it's just an internal biological process? There's a variable missing. Several, actually. And by the time Iruka finishes the lesson, 7-year-old Naruto has already sketched, in his head, 3 separate hypotheses for what that missing variable might be, and ranked them by likelihood. He says none of this out loud. Instead, when Iruka calls on him to answer a basic review question, Naruto blinks like he's just woken up, scratches the back of his head, and gives an answer that's almost right, but just wrong enough to get a few chuckles from the class and a tired sigh from his teacher. Concentrate, Naruto, Iruka says, not unkindly. Just, resigned. And Naruto grins his signature grin, the one you'll come to know so well if you're new to this channel, and says nothing about the fact that he could have corrected Iruka's entire lesson plan in front of the whole class. This, right here, is the core tension of this entire series. A boy capable of reshaping how an entire civilization thinks about energy, chakra, and technology. Choosing, every single day, to be underestimated instead. Why do you think he's doing that? Let me know your theory in the comments. I want to see if anyone catches where this is going before we get there. Now let's talk about where all of this quietly starts turning into something bigger than just a smart kid hiding in plain sight. Naruto's apartment. The one the village begrudgingly provides him, small, sparse, in a part of town nobody with better options wants to live in, has exactly one item of real value in it. Buried in the floorboard beneath his bed is a small metal box, so old the latch has rusted shut. He found it when he was 6, prying up a loose board while looking for a place to hide a stash of stolen instant ramen cups from nosy landlords. Inside, a bundle of old paper, brittle at the edges, covered in a dense, looping handwriting style he doesn't recognize. Few injutsu formulas. Ceiling arrays. Notes in the margins written by someone clearly working through complex theoretical problems, someone who never finished their work. He has no idea, at 6 years old, that this was left behind in that specific apartment by pure administrative accident, a building once used to temporarily house effects belonging to displaced Uzumaki refugees, after Yuzushiogakure fell, decades before he was born. He has no idea these pages are, in a very real sense, distant cousins of his own bloodline's forgotten genius. All he knows is that the moment he unrolls the first scroll, something in his overclocked brain lights up like Christmas morning. Because these aren't just seals. They're equations. Someone, generations ago, was trying to describe chakra mathematically. Trying to quantify it. Trying to prove that chakra behaves according to consistent, learnable rules, the same way physical energy does in ways ordinary people can measure and predict. It's incomplete. Riddled with dead ends, crossed-out attempts, question marks scrawled in frustration. But to Naruto, it reads like a message in a bottle from someone exactly like him, decades in the past, reaching across time to say, someone else saw it too. You're not imagining this. He spends that entire night, 6 years old, alone in a cold apartment, single lamp burning, reading by lamplight until the words blur. Not because he understands everything, but because for the first time in his short, lonely life, Naruto feels like he's found something built specifically for a mind like his. If you've ever found the one book, the one idea, the one hobby that suddenly made you feel like your brain finally had a place to run free, that's this moment for Naruto. Except in his case, running free is eventually going to mean reinventing the technological foundation of an entire hidden world. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind to the academy, because there's someone else you need to meet first. Sasuke Uchiha sits 3 rows ahead of Naruto, back straight, expression permanently unreadable, the top of every ranking that matters. Sakura Haruno sits closer to the front too, sharp and studious, already memorizing everything Iruka says word for word, driven by something the other kids her age don't quite have yet, an early, burning desire to actually be good at something. Neither of them notices Naruto. Not really. To them, he's the loud kid who fails written tests, and somehow still shows up every day with a grin plastered on his face like nothing bothers him. What none of them know, what nobody in that classroom knows, is that if Naruto actually tried on one of Irika's written exams, he wouldn't just pass. He'd break the grading curve so badly Irika would have to redesign the entire test. He doesn't though. Every single time, he deliberately misses just enough questions, phrases his answers just clumsily enough, to land comfortably at the bottom of the class. It takes real, precise effort to fail convincingly when you understand the material perfectly. Naruto has gotten disturbingly good at it. Why? Let's break down the math the way young genius Naruto would break it down for himself, if you asked him directly. Villagers already fear him for the fox. Fear plus jealousy is a combination that gets people hurt. He's seen it happen to other kids who stood out, gotten too much attention, too much success too early. If he suddenly starts acing every test, correcting his teachers, outperforming the Uchiha heir himself in a village that already worships bloodlines and prodigies. How long before someone in a position of power decides a genius Jinchuriki is a liability instead of an asset? How long before the whispers turn into something worse than whispers? Better to stay beneath notice. Better to be the class clown nobody takes seriously. Better to build in the shadows until the day comes when hiding no longer serves him. It's a heavy, calculating decision for a child to make. But then, Naruto Uzumaki was never given the luxury of being a normal child in the first place. Let's jump forward again. Naruto is 8 now, technically still years away from graduating the academy, and his obsession with those Uzumaki Fuinjutsu scrolls has evolved from bedtime reading into something much more dangerous: independent experimentation. He's realized something important. Chakra isn't just something you mold and release through hand science. If those old scrolls are even half right, chakra behaves like a form of energy that can be stored, measured, and theoretically redirected through external materials, not just the human body. Most shinobi never think about this because they don't need to. Chakra is just what you use to do jutsu. It's like asking a bird to explain aerodynamics. The bird just flies. Naruto isn't content to just fly. He wants to know why the wings work. So late one night, in the cramped kitchen of his apartment, using stolen scrap metal from a construction site and a spare storage seal he's copied and modified from the old scrolls at least a dozen times, 8-year-old Naruto attempts to build what, if this were a world with modern physics vocabulary, you or I would call a battery. Except instead of storing electrical charge, he's trying to store raw chakra in an inert object, using a modified sealing array as the container. If you're picturing a kid with a soldering iron and safety goggles, adjust that image. This is a ninja world. His tools are ink, chakra paper, scrap metal, and an intellect operating several standard deviations past anyone else on the planet. He works through failure after failure. The first attempt overloads and the seal just burns off the metal, leaving a scorch mark on his kitchen counter he has to explain away later as a cooking accident. The second attempt leaks chakra so slowly it's essentially useless. The third attempt actually holds, for about 4 minutes, before the container seal fractures and the stored chakra detonates outward in a small, contained burst that blows a chunk out of his kitchen wall and knocks him flat on his back. He lies there on the floor, ears ringing, ceiling dust settling in his hair, and starts laughing. Because it worked. Not perfectly. Not safely. But it worked, for 4 whole minutes, and that means the theory is sound. Chakra can be stored outside the body. Chakra can be engineered. He is 8 years old, and he has just proven a concept that, in his story, no one else in the elemental nations has ever successfully demonstrated. If this were any other story, this is the part where a mentor bursts through the door, awed by the discovery, and takes the boy under their wing immediately. But remember what we said earlier about Naruto's decision to hide? That decision is about to get a lot harder to keep, because someone did hear that explosion. Kakashi Hatake happens to be passing near that stretch of the residential district, off-duty, reading, doing his usual disappearing act from actual responsibility, when a dull whump echoes from a cracked apartment wall 2 streets over. Most jonin would investigate purely out of professional habit. Kakashi investigates because something about the chakra signature in that explosion made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a jutsu he recognized. It felt engineered. Contained. Deliberate, in a way accidental chakra leaks never are. By the time he gets there, Naruto has already scrambled to shove the scorched storage seal under his bed and is loudly, unconvincingly explaining to his very unamused neighbor that he accidentally knocked over the stove. Kakashi says nothing about the wall. Doesn't ask about the smell of ozone ink hanging in the air, so distinct from a kitchen fire it's almost comedic. Instead, he crouches down to Naruto's height, visible eye creased in that lazy, unreadable way of his, and asks one simple, quiet question. What were you building? Naruto's mind, the real one, the one running calculations no one else can see, goes through roughly 40 possible responses in under 2 seconds. Deny everything. Play dumb. Cry. Change the subject. Every option gets discarded almost as fast as it's generated, because Kakashi Hatake is not Irika. Kakashi doesn't miss things. Kakashi's eye is already flicking toward the scorch mark on the wall, the suspicious edge of paper peeking out from under the bed frame. So instead, for the first time in years, 8-year-old Naruto makes a different calculation entirely. He looks up at this quiet, unreadable jonin, a man he barely knows, who's shown him more idle curiosity in 30 seconds than most adults in the village show him in a year, and decides, against every instinct of self-preservation he's built up since he was 4 years old, to tell a piece of the truth. A chakra battery, he mumbles. It's supposed to hold chakra in something that isn't a person. Like storing water in a bucket instead of just, drinking it straight from a river. There's a beat of silence. Kakashi looks at him for a long moment. Then he looks at the scorch mark. Then back at Naruto. Show me, he says. And that, right there, is the moment everything in this story changes. If you've made it this far, you already know this channel is about what-ifs that don't hold back. And I promise you, what Naruto shows Kakashi in that ruined kitchen is just the tip of the iceberg. But before we get to that, let's rewind one more time, because there's context you need about exactly how far Naruto's mind has already run ahead of everyone else's, even at this age. By 8 years old, Naruto's private notebooks, hidden beneath a loose floorboard alongside those Uzumaki scrolls, contain sketches and theories that wouldn't look out of place next to blueprints for actual, functional infrastructure. Crude diagrams of chakra flowing through conductive material the way water flows through pipes. Notes comparing chakra pressure in different materials. Metal holds it briefly but leaks fast. Certain woods hold it longer but release energy more slowly. Human skin and specially treated paper are somehow the most stable mediums of all, which sends him down an entirely new rabbit hole about why paper, proper Uzumaki storage paper, seems to interact with chakra almost like it was designed to. He's begun sketching what he privately calls, in his own made-up terminology since he doesn't yet know real scientific words for these concepts, flow lines, proto-diagrams of circuits, though he doesn't call them that yet, because he has literally never heard the word circuit in his life. He's inventing the vocabulary of technology from scratch, in a world that has never needed it, purely because his mind cannot stop looking for the underlying rules of things. Somewhere in that stack of notebooks is a rough sketch, messy, half-finished, abandoned after only a few lines, of a device that channels chakra through a series of small looped conductors to produce consistent, small bursts of light. He didn't know it yet, sitting there scribbling by lamplight with ink-stained fingers, but that half-finished sketch, dismissed as not useful yet, is the earliest ancestor of something that will one day change how every household in Konoha lights its home after dark. That's how far ahead this 8-year-old's mind is already running. And he hasn't even graduated the academy yet. Back in the present moment of the story, Kakashi crouches in the wreckage of Naruto's kitchen, holding the scorched storage seal up to the light, tracing the modified array with his visible eye. He recognizes fragments of standard Fuinjutsu structure in it, the kind taught to advanced seal specialists, but woven together with something else. Something that doesn't match any known school of sealing. Where did you learn this? He asks, quiet, careful, the lazy tone from earlier completely gone now. Naruto hesitates. This is the moment. The real fork in the road. Everything he's built, the mask, the class clown act, the careful years of hiding, all of it hinges on what he says next. He could lie. Say he found a book somewhere, copied it without understanding it, got lucky. Kakashi might even believe him. Probably would, honestly. Nobody expects a failing academy student to have engineered a working proof of concept for chakra storage technology from first principles. But something about the way Kakashi is looking at him, not with suspicion, not with fear, but with something closer to genuine, careful curiosity, makes Naruto pause. For years, being seen has only ever meant being seen as dangerous. The fox. The demon. The threat. Nobody has ever looked at him like this before. Like what's inside him might be worth understanding instead of fearing. I found some old scrolls, Naruto admits slowly, testing the words like he's not sure they're safe to say out loud. Under the floorboards. They talked about chakra like it was math, like it followed rules. And he shrugs, suddenly looking very much like the 8-year-old he actually is, exhausted and a little scared. I wanted to see if the rules were real. Kakashi is quiet for a long moment, long enough that Naruto's stomach twists into a knot, half convinced he's made a catastrophic mistake. Then Kakashi does something Naruto absolutely does not expect. He laughs. Just once, short and surprised, and reaches out to ruffle Naruto's hair with an easy, casual motion completely at odds with the weight of what just happened. You built a working prototype using half-finished, generations-old theory. With scrap metal and no formal training, Kakashi says, almost more to himself than to Naruto, and your biggest problem is containment integrity under sustained chakra load. Naruto blinks. Yeah? That's not an accident, kid, Kakashi says, tucking the scorch seal into his vest with a care that feels, to Naruto, disturbingly close to respect. That's a real problem. The kind actual seal masters spend years failing to solve. For the first time in longer than Naruto can remember, someone isn't looking at him like a burden, or a monster, or a disappointment. They're looking at him like a puzzle worth solving. And if you know anything about how the rest of this series is going to unfold, you already know exactly how dangerous, and how world-changing, that single moment of being truly seen is about to become. Kakashi doesn't report this to the Hokage right away. Not yet. He tells Naruto, in that same easy, lazy tone, that he's going to keep an eye on things for a while, and leaves it deliberately vague whether that's a threat or a promise. He does, however, start showing up more often after that. Not for training, not yet, but little things. Leaving a book on basic mechanics of energy transfer by accident on Naruto's doorstep, one clearly not written for Shinobi at all, salvaged from some old civilian archive nobody else would think to look through. Asking pointed, casual questions about Naruto's little experiments, gauging just how deep this rabbit hole actually goes. It's the beginning of something neither of them fully understands yet, the first thread connecting Naruto's secret genius to the wider Shinobi world that's about to be forced, kicking and screaming, into an age of invention it was never prepared for. Meanwhile, at the academy, nothing on the surface changes. Naruto still fumbles his written tests. Still gets scolded by Iruka for not paying attention. Still gets brushed aside by classmates who see nothing more than a loud, failing troublemaker with a bad reputation and worse grades. But underneath his bed, in a floorboard compartment steadily filling with more notebooks, sketches, and increasingly ambitious theoretical frameworks, something enormous is quietly gathering momentum. A 12-year-old, soon to be a genin, soon to be thrown headfirst into missions, into wave country, into a war-torn shinobi world that has never once had to reckon with the idea of technological progress, is about to start building things that will make the phrase class clown sound like the biggest lie in the history of Konoha. Because somewhere in his notebooks is a sketch, half-finished but no longer abandoned, of a small woven coil of wire and chakra-conductive metal, designed to do one simple thing, turn stored chakra into steady, controllable light. He doesn't have a word for it yet. But you and I both know exactly what he's building. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're deep into our What If Naruto Had an IQ of 500 series, and last chapter, we watched an 8-year-old Naruto blow a hole in his own kitchen wall proving that chakra could be stored outside the human body, and catch the attention of a certain lazy, book-reading jonin in the process. Today, that quiet discovery is about to turn into something a whole lot bigger. Let's get into Chapter 2. Let's talk about Kakashi Hatake, because over these 4 years, his role in Naruto's life has shifted from curious bystander into something a lot closer to reluctant patron. He never officially reports what he saw that night in Naruto's kitchen. not to the Hokage, not to the academy, not to anyone. Instead, he does something far more Kakashi. He simply starts showing up. A book accidentally left on a windowsill. Never anything shinobi related, always civilian science, basic mechanics, rudimentary explanations of levers and pulleys and pressure, scavenged from old pre-village era archives that most shinobi consider useless trivia. A spare coil of decent quality copper wire found lying around that somehow always finds its way to Naruto's door. The occasional visit, always framed as checking in on the demon container for optics, always ending in a quiet, half-lidded question about whatever Naruto's currently stuck on. Kakashi never explicitly teaches him anything. That's important. Kakashi isn't running an intervention, and he isn't trying to shape Naruto into anything. If you ask Kakashi why he does this, and later in the series someone does ask him, directly, his answer is simple. He was going to keep building these things whether I helped or not. I'd rather he not blow up his apartment building doing it. It's not affection, not exactly. Not yet. But it's the first thread of something that looks a lot like it, quietly forming between a boy who's never had anyone truly on his side, and a jonin who's spent most of his adult life keeping people at arm's length. If you've ever had a mentor who taught you more by being present than by actually lecturing you, that's the relationship we're building here. Let us know in the comments if you've had someone like that in your life. It's a small thing, but it matters more than you'd think. Now let's get to the part you've all been waiting for. Because Naruto's workshop has finally produced something that actually works. We're going to explain this a little carefully, because if you're not big into science, don't worry, we're going to walk through it exactly the way Naruto thinks about it, using the words he's invented for himself, since nobody in the elemental nations has modern scientific vocabulary to hand him. Remember the storage seal from 4 years ago? The one that held chakra for 4 whole minutes before it fractured and blew a hole in his kitchen wall? Since then, Naruto has rebuilt that basic concept dozens of times, refining the containment array bit by bit, patching the leak points the old Uzumaki scrolls hinted at but never fully solved. By age 12, he's got a stable version, a small, palm-sized metal cylinder wrapped in layered storage seal ink, capable of holding a measured amount of chakra safely for hours, sometimes days, without leaking or fracturing. That's the battery. Stage 1 solved. But a battery that just holds energy isn't useful on its own. Trust me, even Naruto knew that. What he wanted was a way to controllably release that stored chakra as something simple, small, and repeatable. Not an explosion. Not a jutsu. Something steady. So he goes back to that half-finished sketch from 4 years ago. The little coil of wire, wrapped tight, chakra-conductive metal threaded through it in a specific, deliberate pattern he worked out through weeks of trial and error. He connects it to his stable battery cell. He channels a small, controlled trickle of stored chakra through the coil, and for about 3 seconds, in the dead of night, in a hidden crawl space under his bed, a tiny, steady point of light glows at the tip of that wire coil. Not a jutsu, not fire, not anything a hand sign could produce, just a small, quiet, artificial light, generated entirely from stored chakra funneled through metal. Naruto stares at it like it's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen in his life. Because in a way it is. This isn't a fluke explosion. This isn't luck. This is proof, real, undeniable proof, that his flowline theory works. Chakra behaves like an engineerable form of energy, and if he can make it produce light on command, there is functionally no limit to what else it could eventually be shaped into. If you know anything about where this story is eventually going, you already know this exact moment. A scrawny 12-year-old, alone in the dark, grinning at a tiny glowing wire, is the true birth of an entire technological revolution that's going to reshape the elemental nations. But right now, in this moment, it's just a kid who finally built something that works, with nobody around to see it but himself. That's about to change, though. Because Kakashi picks that exact week to check in again. So, Kakashi says, leaning in the doorway of Naruto's tiny apartment with his usual half-lidded, unbothered expression, one hand holding his book at exactly the angle that lets him seem like he's reading it. Still blowing holes in the walls? Nope, Naruto says, way too proud of himself to even attempt his usual deflection. Come here. I want to show you something. This alone should tell you how much their relationship has shifted over 4 years. The Naruto from Chapter 1 would have panicked, hidden everything, lied about a cooking accident. This Naruto drags Kakashi by the sleeve of his flak vest toward the crawlspace under his bed like he's about to unveil the greatest treasure in the world. Kakashi, to his credit, doesn't complain about the tight space, the dust, or the mild indignity of a jonin crouching under a 12-year-old's bed frame. He just watches, silent, as Naruto pulls out his little metal battery cylinder, connects it with practiced, careful movements to his coiled wire contraption, and channels a thin trickle of chakra through it. The light blooms at the tip, small, steady, warm, and holds for nearly 10 full seconds this time before flickering out. Kakashi doesn't say anything for a long moment. His visible eye is fixed on that little dead coil of wire like he's trying to work out if what he just saw actually happened. Do it again, he finally says. Naruto does. And again. And a third time, just to prove it wasn't luck. You built a light source, Kakashi says slowly, that doesn't use fire, doesn't use a jutsu, and doesn't require hand signs or a chakra network to activate once it's charged. Yeah, Naruto says, practically vibrating with excitement. Anybody could use it. You don't even need to be a shinobi. You just need the battery thing charged up first, and then anyone can. He stops mid-sentence, because he's just watched Kakashi's expression shift into something Naruto has genuinely never seen on the man's face before. Not amusement. Not lazy detachment. Something that looks a lot like genuine, uneasy realization. Naruto, Kakashi says carefully, do you understand what you just said? Naruto blinks. That, anybody could use it? That civilians could use it, Kakashi corrects, quiet and precise. That someone with zero chakra control, zero shinobi training, could hold the device you built and produce usable light on command, as long as someone charged the battery beforehand. He lets that sit in the air for a moment. Do you understand what that means for a village that's built its entire military and economic advantage on the fact that chakra techniques require years of specialized training that only shinobi have access to? Naruto's grin falters, just slightly, as the weight of that question actually lands. This is a really important moment in the story, so let's slow down and unpack it together, because it's easy to miss just how big a deal this is if you're not paying attention. In the world of Naruto, chakra and jutsu are inherently exclusive. You need years of training, chakra control exercises, and often bloodline or clan-specific techniques to do anything meaningful with chakra at all. That exclusivity is exactly what gives shinobi villages their power. Ordinary civilians simply cannot access what shinobi can access. But a battery, something anyone can charge once, and then anyone else can use, no training required, breaks that exclusivity completely. It's the very first thread of an idea that's going to eventually reshape the balance of power across the entire elemental nations. Not through stronger jutsu. Not through bigger armies, through access. If that idea excites you as much as it excites us, stick around, because we are just scratching the surface of what this means for the story ahead. Kakashi doesn't lecture Naruto about the political implications right then. He's not entirely sure himself yet what this all means, and he's smart enough to know that a half-formed theory shouldn't turn into panic. But he does make one thing clear, crouched there under the bed frame, dead serious in a way Naruto's rarely seen from him. This doesn't leave this room. Not yet, Kakashi says. Not because it's bad, Naruto. Because it's big. And big, unprotected ideas get people hurt, sometimes the person who had the idea in the first place. Naruto nods slowly, and for the first time, some of that 4-year-old instinct to hide comes rushing back, except now it's not fear of being seen as a monster. It's the much more mature, much heavier fear of being seen as a weapon. So what do I do? Naruto asks quietly. Just keep building stuff and never tell anyone. Kakashi is quiet for a moment, turning the little wire coil over in his fingers, studying it the way you'd study a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit the picture you thought you were building. No, he says finally. You keep building. But we bring in someone who can actually help you build it safely, and who can help make sure that when this does come out, it comes out in a way that protects you instead of exposing you. Who? Kakashi's visible eye curves up in the shape of his usual easy smile, though there's something more careful behind it this time. Leave that to me. Now, before we jump to that next part of the story, let's take a quick detour and talk about team assignments, because if you know your canon, you know genin teams are being formed right around this point in the timeline, And this story isn't going to skip that. Naruto graduates the academy the same way canon says he does, after a rocky moment involving the Mizuki incident, the Forbidden Scroll, and the reveal of the Nine Tails to a boy who, unlike canon Naruto, already suspected on some level that something about him was different, even if he didn't have all the details. We're not going to rewrite that whole sequence beat for beat here. You already know the shape of it. Naruto steals the scroll under Mizuki's manipulation, learns the shadow clone technique in a single night thanks to a mind that processes and retains information at a speed no instructor could anticipate, and ends up saving Irika's life in the forest when Mizuki's betrayal comes to light. Here's where it differs though. Because Naruto's mind works the way it does, he doesn't just learn the shadow clone jutsu that night. He understands it, really understands it, on a structural level nobody else in that forest could follow, including Mizuki. He recognizes, almost instantly, that shadow clones aren't just combat tools. They're parallel processing units. A way to think through multiple problems simultaneously, to test multiple hypotheses at once, to build and study in ways a single body never could. If you're the kind of viewer who likes connecting dots ahead of time, hold on to that thought. It's going to become a very, very big deal in later chapters, once Naruto realizes exactly what shadow clones mean for a mind capable of running dozens of trains of thought at once. Naruto graduates. Irika, moved by everything that happened in the forest, gives him his own forehead protector in the same touching scene you already know and love. Naruto walks home that night wearing his headband, grinning ear to ear, and this time it's not a mask. He's actually happy, genuinely, fully happy, for maybe the first time in longer than he can remember. The next morning, team assignments are posted, and Naruto ends up exactly where canon says he does, Team 7, alongside Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno, under the leadership of one Kakashi Hatake. Naruto, upon hearing this, turns immediately toward where he knows Kakashi is undoubtedly lurking nearby with that same lazy posture and unreadable book, and mouths a single, delighted phrase, "You planned this." Kakashi, not even looking up from his book, just shrugs. He absolutely planned this. Let's pause here and think about why. Kakashi could have requested any team assignment, could have kept his growing awareness of Naruto's abilities entirely separate from his shinobi duties. Instead, he deliberately maneuvers to become Naruto's actual Jonin sensei, not just a curious bystander anymore, but the one adult in the entire village with direct, daily, sanctioned access to observe, guide, and quietly protect whatever this kid is building. It's a small decision on paper. In practice, it's one of the most important decisions in this entire story, because it means that everything that happens next, the land of waves, the Chunin exams, the slow unraveling of Naruto's secret, happens under the direct supervision of someone who already understands, at least partially, what's at stake. If you're new to storytelling analysis and want to understand why writers do this is called narrative scaffolding. You put a trusted, competent character in exactly the right position early on, so that later, bigger reveals don't feel like they're coming out of nowhere. Kakashi becoming Team 7's sensei isn't a coincidence in this story. It's a deliberate, quiet setup for everything still to come. The famous bell test happens almost exactly the way you remember it from canon. Kakashi's late arrival, the explanation of the two bells and only enough for 2 of the 3 genin to pass, the warning about teamwork. Except this time, there's a small, telling difference buried in the scene that you'd only catch if you were looking closely. When Kakashi finishes his explanation and braces for the usual scramble of overconfident genin rushing him individually, Naruto doesn't rush in at all. He hangs back, arms crossed, studying Kakashi's stance, his positioning relative to the 2 bells, the exact phrasing he used in his instructions. He said, "Get the bells from me," Naruto says slowly, mostly to himself, but just loud enough for Sasuke and Sakura to hear. He didn't say we can't work together to do it. Sasuke, predictably, scoffs. Sakura, torn between wanting to impress Sasuke and genuine curiosity, hesitates. It's a test about teamwork, Naruto continues, still watching Kakashi like he's mapping out a battlefield rather than a training exercise, which means the actual test isn't the bells. It's whether we figure out we're supposed to share them. This is a subtle thing, but it's important. This is the first time in the entire series that Naruto's real intelligence bleeds through in front of his own teammates, even if just a little. Not overwhelming, not suspicious. Just a kid noticing something clever that the narrative wants him to notice. Sasuke still ends up dismissing him. Sakura still ends up more focused on Sasuke's approval than Naruto's insight. But it's there. A seed. And if you're paying attention, you'll notice this exact same pattern repeat, again and again, across every arc still to come. Naruto quietly demonstrating flashes of brilliance that everyone around him is just a little too distracted to fully register. The test unfolds close enough to canon that we don't need to walk through every beat. Naruto's realization about teamwork eventually convincing his more stubborn teammates, Kakashi's approval at the end, the whole team passing together instead of the usual single survivor. But there's an extra moment tacked onto the end of this scene that canon never had. As Sasuke and Sakura head off, still bickering about who actually deserves more credit for passing, Kakashi lingers behind with Naruto, hands in his pockets, watching the other two disappear around the training grounds tree line. You held back today, Kakashi says quietly, not a question. Yeah, Naruto admits. Good, Kakashi says. Then, after a pause, but you're going to have to stop doing that eventually. Missions get dangerous. Dangerous situations don't leave room for holding back. Naruto doesn't answer right away. He just looks down at his own hands that, underneath his bed frame, back in his apartment, have built something no other shinobi in the village even knows is possible. I know, he says finally. I'm just not ready for everyone to know yet. Kakashi studies him for a long moment, then reaches out and ruffles his hair, same easy gesture as always. Then we'll make sure you get to decide when that day comes, he says. Not someone else. It's a small promise. But it's one that's going to matter enormously in just a few chapters, when circumstances outside anyone's control start forcing that decision to happen a lot sooner than either of them would like. Let's close out this chapter with one more scene, because it's important groundwork for everything still ahead. That night, back in his tiny apartment, Naruto sits cross-legged in his crawlspace workshop, notebook open in his lap, staring at his little glowing wire coil experiment. Beside it, a brand new notebook, a gift, quietly left on his doorstep that morning without explanation, though Naruto has a very good guess who left it, filled with blank, high-quality paper, the kind that costs more than he'd normally ever be able to afford. On the inside cover, in familiar, lazy handwriting, is a short note. Fill it with something that changes things. Just, maybe start small. K. Naruto grins down at that note for a long moment. Then he flips to the first blank page, picks up his pen, and starts sketching. Not another battery. Not another light coil. Something bigger this time, a rough diagram of a small, portable device combining his storage seal battery technology with a simple mechanical trigger, designed to detect subtle vibrations in the ground and translate them into an audible alert. He doesn't have the word for it yet. But you and I both know exactly what he's drawing. A seismic sensor. The very first prototype of an early warning system. The kind of invention that, in just a couple of chapters, is going to save Team 7's lives in the middle of a mission gone very, very wrong in the land of waves. Welcome back. Last time, Team 7 came together, the bell tests wrapped up with all three genin passing together, and Naruto quietly picked up a notebook meant for something bigger than light coils and battery cells. Today, that something bigger starts taking shape, and by the end of this chapter, Team 7 is about to step onto a road that changes everything. Let's get into Chapter 3. Let's talk about what that actually means in this world, because radio isn't a word that exists yet in the elemental nations, and Naruto himself doesn't have that vocabulary either. What he has is a problem he's been chewing on since that very first night testing his light coil. If chakra can be stored, and if chakra can be converted into steady light through a conductive coil, could it also carry information across a distance? It's a bigger leap than it sounds. Storing chakra is static, energy sitting in a container. Producing light is a simple, direct conversion, energy in, light out, 1-to-1. But sending a message means encoding something meaningful into a chakra signal, transmitting it, and decoding it back into something understandable on the other end. That's an entirely different order of problem, and Naruto knows at the moment he starts sketching. He spends nearly 3 weeks failing at it in every way you can imagine. His first attempt tries to use raw chakra pulses, timed in patterns, essentially reinventing a very crude version of a code system, except every pulse degrades unpredictably over distance, turning his careful patterns into meaningless noise within about 10 meters. His second attempt tries layering multiple storage seals together to boost signal strength, which just results in chakra bleeding out in every direction like a leaking pipe, completely undermining any attempt at directional transmission. The breakthrough. And if you've been enjoying this series so far, this is exactly the kind of moment we love giving you. Comes almost by accident, late one night, while Naruto is reviewing his old Uzumaki scrolls for what feels like the 100th time. Buried in a section he'd previously skimmed past as irrelevant is a passage about chakra resonance. The idea that two objects, if sealed with matching, specifically tuned arrays, can share a kind of sympathetic vibration, responding to changes in one by producing an echo in the other, regardless of distance. At the time it was written, whoever penned those notes was almost certainly describing some kind of long-range detection or tracking seal. Naruto reads it and sees something else entirely. A transmission method that doesn't rely on raw chakra pulses degrading over distance at all, but on synchronized resonance between two matched devices. He spends the next several nights building two small paired devices, twin metal cylinders, each wrapped in matching resonance-tuned seals, connected internally to his refined battery and coil setup. If his theory is right, activating one should produce a detectable, matching resonance in the other, no matter how far apart they are, as long as the tuning matches precisely. The first real test happens on a quiet evening, with Naruto placing one device in his apartment and sprinting, out of breath, all the way to a rooftop nearly half a kilometer away with the second device in hand. He activates it, sends a single, simple pulse, the ninja world's very first primitive Morse code-like signal, though of course he doesn't call it that, and waits. Nothing happens for almost 30 seconds. Long enough that Naruto starts running through his mental checklist of failure points, assuming he's messed up the tuning array yet again. Then the device in his hand gives the faintest, almost imperceptible warm hum, matching the pulse pattern he sent from his apartment half a kilometer away. Naruto doesn't scream in triumph. He can't. It's the middle of the night, and screaming would bring exactly the kind of attention he's spent his whole life avoiding. Instead, he just stands there on that rooftop, grinning so wide his face hurts, watching the stars, thinking about every single door this one small, humming device has just kicked wide open. If you've ever had a moment where a difficult problem you'd been chewing on for weeks suddenly just clicked, that feeling, multiplied by 100, is exactly where Naruto is standing right now. And trust me, this device, messy, primitive, barely more than a glorified alert system right now, is going to matter enormously by the time we get further into this series. Of course, Naruto still has to actually be a genin, which means D-rank missions continue, blissfully unaware of the quiet revolution happening under his landlord's floorboards. Sasuke and Sakura, for their part, have started to notice something is a little off about their loud, clumsy teammate. Though notice might be too strong a word, it's more that certain small things have started accumulating in the backs of their minds, without either of them quite connecting the dots yet. There's the time Naruto shows up to a fence-painting mission with faint, telltale ink stains on his fingers that definitely aren't paint, thin, precise lines more consistent with Fuinjutsu brushwork than the sloppy strokes he uses on the actual fence. Sakura notices, frowns slightly, and asks if he's been practicing calligraphy or something. Naruto laughs it off with an excuse about helping an old lady with some paperwork, and the moment passes. There's the afternoon a stray cat, not Tora, a different one of the many strays that live near Naruto's apartment, follows Naruto around during a break, and Naruto absently reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small folded scrap of chakra paper, tapping it lightly against a nearby drain pipe. The cat, strangely, perks up immediately and trots off in a specific direction, almost like it heard something none of the humans standing there could hear. Sasuke catches this out of the corner of his eye, brow furrowing slightly, filing it away as one more strange, inexplicable Naruto quirk in a long list of them. There's the quiet, persistent fact that despite consistently scoring near the bottom of every written academy test throughout his childhood, Naruto's chakra control during basic tree-walking exercises, one of the few genuinely difficult chakra control drills every genin has to learn, comes disturbingly close to matching Sakura's, widely considered the best natural chakra control in their entire graduating class. Kakashi notices this one immediately and says absolutely nothing about it, which is, in its own quiet way, exactly the kind of protection he promised. None of these threads connect into anything solid yet. Sasuke chalks it up to hidden training, some kind of secret regimen Naruto's stubbornly kept private, probably out of pride. Sakura assumes something similar, occasionally wondering out loud if Naruto's been getting extra coaching from someone, though she never pushes hard enough to actually ask him directly. If you've ever had a friend or coworker who quietly turned out to be way more capable than anyone assumed, you know exactly what this slow build feels like. The clues are all there. Nobody's connected them yet. And that's exactly how Naruto wants it for now. Let's shift gears, because it's time for the mission that changes absolutely everything about this story going forward. You already know the beats, because if you're watching this channel, you've watched, or read, the original story at some point. Team 7 gets assigned what's supposed to be a simple C-rank escort mission. Protect a bridge builder named Tazuna as he travels back to his home in the Land of Waves, and make sure he arrives safely to finish his life's work. The Hokage's mission room scene plays out almost exactly the way you remember. Tazuna, a little older, exhausted, more than a little grumpy about being assigned a squad of genin instead of full jonin. Naruto's usual boisterous outburst about being the future Hokage. Kakashi's easy acceptance of the mission on his team's behalf. There's one small addition to the scene, though, that canon never had. A tiny beat easy to miss if you're not paying attention. As Tazuna sizes up the 3 genin standing in front of him with obvious skepticism, his eyes land on Naruto last, lingering just a fraction of a second longer than they do on Sasuke or Sakura. It's nothing dramatic. Tazuna doesn't say anything about it. But there's something in the way Naruto studies him back, quick, assessing, cataloging details about Tazuna's exhausted posture, the calluses on his hands, the faint tremor of overwork in his grip, his juice. Actually, let's correct that. In this story, given our usual house rules, Tazuna's traveling flask contains tea instead, something he sips at throughout the journey to steady his nerves and keep himself warm on the road. Naruto notices the tremor in his grip regardless, cataloging it the same way he catalogs everything, filed away, assessed, considered a possible clue about the physical toll of whatever's been wearing this man down. It's a small detail. But Naruto's mind doesn't really do small details. Everything gets processed, filed, cross-referenced against everything else he already knows. And by the time the team sets out on the road toward the Land of Waves, Naruto has already quietly concluded, well before anyone else on the team suspects it, that Tazuna is hiding something about the true nature of this mission. He doesn't say anything yet. But he's watching. The journey unfolds close to canon at first. The ambush by the Demon Brothers, the reveal that this simple C-rank mission is actually a dangerous, undisclosed A-rank escort into hostile territory. Tazuna's tearful, guilt-heavy confession about the poverty crushing his home and the tyrant, Gato, strangling Wave Country's economy. But there's a scene here worth slowing down for, because it's the first time Naruto's genius directly, visibly intersects with an actual life-or-death shinobi encounter, instead of staying safely contained inside his hidden workshop. When the Demon Brothers spring their ambush, the chain-wrapped attack meant to catch Kakashi off guard and separate the team, Canon Naruto freezes for a moment, caught off guard by real combat, before Kakashi saves the day and the fight resolves in the team's favor with Sasuke's timely intervention. In this version, something's different. Not the outcome. The ambush still gets foiled, Kakashi still steps in at the right moment, nobody's badly hurt. But in the half-second chaos of the attack unfolding, while Sasuke is already moving to intercept and Sakura is shielding Tazuna, Naruto's mind runs through the mechanics of the attack with the same detached, rapid analysis he applies to everything else: the chain, the rotation speed, the angle of the brothers' approach. In less than a second, some part of Naruto's overclocked brain has already calculated the weak point in their coordinated attack, the brief half-second gap between the chain's full extension and its retraction, the exact moment the two attackers are most vulnerable to a counter because their combined weapon can't reverse direction instantly. He doesn't act on it directly. Sasuke's already moving, and there's no need for Naruto to insert himself into a fight that's already being handled. But in the aftermath, as Kakashi finishes tying up the two defeated attackers and Tazuna stumbles through his tearful confession about Gato and the suffering of his village, Naruto is quiet in a way that doesn't fully match his usual post-fight bravado. Kakashi notices. Of course he notices. He notices everything about Naruto these days. You saw the gap, Kakashi says quietly, falling into step beside Naruto as the group resumes walking. Not a question. Yeah, Naruto admits. Half a second, right after the chain reaches full extension. Before they can reverse it, Kakashi's visible eye studies him for a long moment. Most shonen take years of field experience to spot timing gaps like that in real combat. You saw it in under a second, in your first real fight. Naruto shrugs, a little uncomfortable with the attention. I just think about how things move. Like machines. Everything's got a rhythm if you look at it right. That's a dangerous skill to have and hide, Naruto, Kakashi says, not unkindly. Especially where we're headed. Naruto doesn't answer that directly. But the weight of it settles over him as the group continues down the winding road toward the land of waves, mist thickening ahead of them, a boat waiting to ferry them silently across the water under cover of fog. If you've ever had a moment where you realized the skill you thought was harmless was actually a lot more dangerous than you assumed, that's exactly the tension Naruto's sitting with right now. And it's about to get a whole lot more real, because waiting on the other side of that misty water is one of the most dangerous Shinobi Team 7 has ever faced. The boat crossing plays out with the same hushed, atmospheric tension you remember, the boatman's nervous silence, the ghostly shape of the unfinished bridge looming out of the fog, Tozuna's quiet explanation of what that bridge means for his people's survival. It's a genuinely good piece of scene setting in the original story, and we're not going to rush past it here either. Konoha's forests give way to damp, salt-tinged air and heavy mist, and there's a palpable sense of stepping into somewhere far more dangerous than any of Team 7's previous missions. And then, on the road toward Tozuna's home, Kanen's most famous early confrontation arrives right on schedule. A massive cleaver-like blade comes spinning out of the mist, forcing the group to scatter, and a figure appears atop the handle of the embedded sword. Tall, bandaged around the lower half of his face, missing his shirt entirely in that iconic silhouette. Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist. Kakashi steps forward immediately, hand rising to lift his forehead protector and reveal the Sharingan underneath, recognizing Zabuza on sight as a former member of the Hidden Mist's elite assassination corps. The confrontation unfolds with the same tension as Kanen, Zabuza's cold, clipped assessment of the situation, his casual cruelty in acknowledging he's here to kill Tozuna, Kakashi's grim readiness to fight a Jonin-level opponent well above his Genin student's ability to meaningfully assist. But here's where this version diverges in a small, quiet, important way. While Kakashi and Zabuza circle each other, exchanging tense words, sizing each other up before the fight properly begins, Naruto isn't looking at Zabuza's face, or his chakra output, or the general threat level radiating off him the way Sasuke and Sakura are. He's looking at the sword. Specifically, he's looking at the way it's balanced. The way it moved through the air when it was thrown, heavy, but not clumsy, deliberately weighted for a very particular fighting style built around momentum and follow-through rather than quick, light strikes. He's looking at the slightly worn, notched texture along one edge, the way certain sections of the blade seem to have a different sheen than others, subtly darker, like the metal composition itself isn't entirely uniform. If you've ever watched a martial arts documentary and had someone point out exactly why a particular weapon is dangerous based purely on its design, that's the mental process running through Naruto's head right now, except he's doing it in real time, in the middle of an active life-or-death standoff, purely on instinct. That's not just a big sword, Naruto thinks, filing away every detail with the same rapid, obsessive precision he applies to his inventions back home. The metal's inconsistent, probably folded or layered differently in sections. That's not decoration. That's functional. It's built to store and redirect impact force differently depending on where it strikes. Which means the guy swinging it either commissioned custom work from a serious smith, or it's some kind of specialized chakra conductive blade. He doesn't say any of this out loud, obviously. There's a giant sword-wielding Jonin-level missing Nin standing 30 feet away threatening to kill their client, and this is very much not the moment for a lecture on metallurgy. But the observation lodges itself firmly in his mind, another entry in the enormous, ever-growing mental catalog he's been building since he was 4 years old, staring at ripples in a puddle. The fight that follows plays out essentially the way you remember it. Zabuza's suffocating mist concealment technique, Kakashi's tense, outmatched struggle against a genuinely dangerous opponent. The terrifying moment Zabuza traps Kakashi in a water prison technique and sends a water clone after the genin and Tazuna. Cannon's beats hold here because they need to. This fight, and its resolution, are load-bearing for everything that comes after, including Haku's introduction and the emotional arc between Zabuza and his young companion. We're not going to undercut that by having Naruto's genius solve everything instantly. Genius is not the same as raw power, and it's important that this story respects that distinction. But there is one small, telling addition worth mentioning. When Zabuza's water clone advances on the genin, and Sasuke steps up to intercept with quick, controlled shuriken work exactly as canon shows, Naruto, rattled, genuinely afraid in a way his usual bravado can't quite cover, finds himself running the same rapid mental calculations he ran during the fight with the demon brothers. Water clones, he reasons in the fraction of a second he has to think, are still bound by certain physical limitations regarding chakra density and structural cohesion. If the clone takes enough sustained damage in a short enough window, the chakra holding its form together should destabilize faster than a fresh clone would. It's not a groundbreaking insight. Plenty of experienced shinobi understand basic water clone mechanics. But it's the first time Naruto's mental process runs directly parallel to actual textbook shinobi knowledge, rather than off in some entirely new direction of his own invention, and it's a small, important signal for the story going forward. His genius isn't just about building strange new machines. It's a fundamentally different way of processing information, one that applies just as easily to combat theory as it does to fuinjutsu and energy transfer. The fight resolves the way canon says it does. The well-timed intervention that frees Kakashi from the water prison, the coordinated teamwork that forces Zabuza to retreat, and the sudden, mysterious appearance of a masked hunter-nin who claims to finish Zabuza off personally before vanishing with his corpse. Kakashi, exhausted from the fight and the toll of overusing his Sharingan, collapses shortly afterward, and the team half carries, half supports him the rest of the way to Tazuna's home, where his daughter Tsunami and grandson Inari are waiting. That night, with Kakashi resting and the rest of the household asleep, Naruto sits alone on the small back porch of Tazuna's house, looking out over the dark water toward the unfinished bridge, still turning that sword over and over in his mind. He's not thinking about Zabuza's threat level, or Kakashi's condition, or even the obvious lie of that hunter-nin's convenient method of disposal, though that detail is absolutely filed away too, waiting patiently near the top of his mental catalog for the moment it becomes relevant again. He's thinking about the blade itself, about layered metal and chakra conductivity, and what it would mean if weapons, not just seals, not just his little battery and coil experiments, but actual weapons, could be engineered with the same deliberate precision he's been applying to his own inventions. He pulls out his notebook, the one Kakashi left for him, the one meant for something bigger, and by the dim light of a small storage seal lamp he built himself, starts sketching. Not a copy of Zabuza's blade. Something new. Notes on metal composition, chakra flow through different alloys, the theoretical possibility of a blade that could store and release chakra the same way his battery cells do, turning an ordinary weapon into something capable of far more than simple physical damage. He doesn't finish the sketch that night. It's too big an idea to solve in one sitting, and some part of him, the part that's spent years carefully managing exactly how much of himself the world gets to see, knows that this particular notebook page is going to need a lot more thought before it's ready for anything close to real testing. But he closes the notebook that night with a full, settled certainty of one simple fact. Whatever Wave Country still has in store for Team 7, and whatever comes after it, the world of shinobi combat is about to have a lot more variables in it than anyone currently expects. If you've ever had one of those nights where a single detail, one weird little observation, quietly rearranges everything you thought you understood about a problem, you already know exactly the kind of moment Naruto's sitting in on that porch. And trust me, that sketch in his notebook is going to matter a whole lot sooner than he expects. The first thing Naruto notices is the well. Tsunami hauls water from it twice a day. A hand-crank system so old and worn that half her morning is spent just wrestling the mechanism into cooperating. It's slow. It's exhausting. And for a village already stretched thin trying to survive Gato's economic stranglehold, every hour spent on backbreaking manual labor is an hour not spent on something that might actually help lift them out of poverty. Naruto watches Tsunami struggle with that crank on the morning of the second day, says nothing, and disappears into the small toolshed out back for several hours. What emerges that evening is, by any modern standard, a laughably primitive invention, a simple mechanical pump assembly built from spare parts, powered by a modified storage seal battery cell no bigger than Naruto's fist, using the same chakra-to-motion conversion principles he'd worked out months earlier with his very first coil experiments. Instead of turning stored chakra into light, this device turns it into steady, repeated mechanical force, enough to drive a simple piston mechanism that draws water up through the well's shaft without anyone needing to crank anything at all. It's not elegant. It groans, it occasionally sputters, and Naruto has to adjust the seal array twice in the first hour just to keep it from leaking chakra out in useless directions. But by the time Tsunami comes out that evening expecting her usual exhausting routine, she instead finds a steady, quiet trickle of water flowing from a spout Naruto's rigged up, filling her buckets almost entirely on its own. She stares at it for a long moment, then at Naruto, then back at the device. "How?" is all she manages to say. Naruto, scratching the back of his head with that familiar sheepish grin, gives her the same simplified explanation he's gotten used to giving anyone who isn't Kakashi. It's kind of like a battery. Chakra gets stored in it, and then it uses a little bit at a time to keep the pump moving. You just gotta swap the battery out every couple days when it runs low. Tsunami doesn't fully understand the mechanics. She doesn't need to. What she understands is that a task which used to eat up nearly 2 hours of her day, every single day, now takes about 10 minutes of occasionally checking on a strange little device a 12-year-old genin built out of spare parts and scrap wire. If you've ever had someone solve a problem for you that you just resigned yourself to living with forever, that's the exact look on Tsunami's face in this scene. It's small. It's not going to save the village on its own. But it's the very first visible proof, outside Naruto's own hidden workshop, that his inventions can genuinely improve people's lives. And trust me, word about the strange genin boy's water machine spreads through Tezuna's small circle of trusted neighbors a lot faster than Naruto expects. Kakashi, still resting but well enough to sit up and pay attention, hears about the water pump from Tsunami herself during one of her visits to check on him. And when Naruto stops by his room later that evening, Kakashi's got that same careful, considering look on his face that Naruto's slowly learned to associate with Kakashi turning something important over in his mind. You do understand, Kakashi says slowly, that a device like that, in the hands of the wrong person, could be reverse engineered. Naruto blinks. It's just a water pump. It's proof that stored chakra can perform continuous mechanical work without a shinobi actively molding it, Kakashi corrects, patient but firm. That's not just anything. That's a foundational discovery. Somebody clever enough, Gado's people, a rival village's seal specialists, anyone with the right background, could look at that pump and start asking very dangerous questions about what else stored chakra could power. Naruto's grin fades slightly as the weight of that sinks in. He hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd just seen a tired woman struggling with a broken crank and wanted to fix it. I didn't think about that, he admits quietly. I know, Kakashi says, not unkindly. That's exactly why I'm telling you now, instead of after it becomes a problem. He pauses, considering his next words carefully. This isn't me telling you to stop helping people, Naruto. It's me telling you that from here on, every time you build something, you need to ask 2 questions before you use it. Who benefits? And who could weaponize it if it fell into the wrong hands? It's a heavy lesson for a 12-year-old to sit with, and you can see it land on Naruto's face. The same careful, calculating expression from all the way back when he was 4 years old, watching ripples in a puddle, except now there's real weight behind it, real consequences attached to every idea his overclocked mind produces. Okay, Naruto says finally. Who benefits? Who could weaponize it? Got it. Kakashi nods, satisfied, and after a moment, adds something quieter, almost gentle. For what it's worth, helping Tsunami with that pump was a good instinct. Just keep thinking it through. That's all I'm asking. If you're the kind of viewer who appreciates a mentor figure who actually mentors, instead of just handing out cryptic one-liners and disappearing, that's exactly the role Kakashi's slowly settling into here. And it's going to matter enormously, because the next test of Naruto's inventions isn't going to be nearly as low stakes as a well pump. Let's talk about training, Because you already know this part of canon, Kakashi, once back on his feet, decides the genin needs serious chakra control work before facing Zabuza again, and introduces the famous tree climbing exercise, molding just the right amount of chakra to your feet to walk up a vertical tree trunk without your hands. This scene plays out mostly the way you remember, with one important adjustment that's been quietly building since Chapter 2. Sasuke, naturally gifted and endlessly driven, makes steady, visible progress, marking his best attempts higher and higher up the trunk with kunai scratches. Sakura, to everyone's mild surprise including her own, actually masters the exercise almost immediately, her naturally excellent chakra control finally getting a moment to shine outside the shadow of her more flashy teammates. And Naruto, canon's clumsy, chakra hemorrhaging dead last, matches her almost step for step, not instantly, not suspiciously perfectly. Naruto's smart enough, even now, to know that closing that gap too fast, too cleanly, would raise exactly the kind of questions he's spent years avoiding. So he stumbles convincingly through the first several attempts, exaggerating a few falls for effect, muttering frustrated curses under his breath the way canon Naruto always does. But underneath that performance, the truth is simpler. Naruto's spent years quietly refining minute chakra control through nightly experiments with his storage seals and coiled devices, calibrating tiny, precise amounts of chakra output for his inventions to function properly. Tree climbing, for him, isn't actually that different from tuning a seal array. It's just another problem of precision, and precision is something his mind has been training, unofficially, for a very long time. By the end of the first full day, Naruto's marks on his tree are sitting almost exactly level with Sakura's. Sasuke notices. Of course Sasuke notices. Competition is basically his second language. He says nothing out loud, but there's a flicker of something in his expression, somewhere between suspicion and grudging respect, that lingers for the rest of the exercise. Kakashi, watching from a short distance away, doesn't say anything either. But the look on his face, hidden mostly behind his mask, is something closer to quiet approval. If you've been enjoying watching Naruto's careful balancing act between hiding his abilities and actually needing to use them, this is exactly the kind of tension we're going to keep leaning on throughout this series. It's getting harder and harder for him to stay convincingly hidden, and honestly, at a certain point, hiding stops being useful at all. We're getting closer to that point every chapter. Now let's get to the part you've really been waiting for, because it's time for one of the most important scenes in this entire arc, the forest, the flowers, and Haku. This scene unfolds almost beat for beat the way canon presents it. Naruto, exhausted from training, falling asleep in the forest, waking to find a gentle, soft-spoken stranger gathering medicinal herbs nearby. The quiet conversation between them. Haku's calm, thoughtful words about strength, about having someone precious to protect, delivered with the same gentle ambiguity that makes this scene so memorable in the original story. We're keeping this scene close to canon deliberately, because it's important groundwork for Haku's character and the emotional core of what's still to come. But there's a small addition worth mentioning, consistent with everything we've built about Naruto's mind so far. While Haku speaks about strength and precious people, Naruto, even mid-conversation, even genuinely moved by what Haku's saying, can't quite turn off the part of his brain that's constantly cataloging details. He notices the calluses on Haku's hands that don't quite match simple herb gathering. He notices the faint, telltale chakra signature clinging to Haku's clothing, something he recognizes, distantly, from the lingering traces left behind after the fight with Zabuza's water clone. He notices the careful, practiced way Haku moves, economical, precise, nothing wasted, the exact opposite of someone unfamiliar with combat. He doesn't say any of this out loud. Whatever Haku is, whatever secret is clearly being kept here. Naruto's instinct, same as it's always been, is to file the observation away quietly rather than force a confrontation he's not ready for. But when Haku finally rises to leave, offering that same gentle smile from canon, Naruto can't quite stop himself from saying one small, quiet thing. "Hey," he says, as Haku turns to go. "That precious person you're protecting. I hope it's worth it. Whatever you're doing for them." Haku pauses, glancing back over their shoulder with an unreadable expression, clearly caught slightly off guard by the weight behind such a simple statement from someone who, moments ago, seemed like just a tired, ordinary genin. "I hope the same for you," Haku says finally, softly, before disappearing into the trees. It's a small moment. But if you've watched this story before, you already know exactly how much weight that exchange is going to carry by the time we reach the bridge. Let's talk about the seismic sensor now, because this is where Naruto's inventions stop being background texture and start actively shaping the plot. Remember, back in Chapter 2, the rough sketch Naruto made of a device combining his battery technology with a simple mechanical trigger, designed to detect vibrations in the ground and translate them into an audible alert. In the days following the tree climbing exercise, with Kakashi's warning about weaponization still fresh in his mind, Naruto finally finishes building it, not as a weapon, but explicitly as a defensive tool, something that benefits his team without handing anyone a blueprint for offensive technology. The device itself is deceptively simple, a shallow metal disc, buried just beneath the surface of the ground, connected through a thin, carefully insulated wire to a small receiver unit that produces a soft, steady hum whenever it detects rhythmic ground vibrations consistent with footsteps approaching from a specific direction. It's crude. It has a limited range, maybe 30 meters at best. It can't distinguish between a threat and an innocent traveler, but it works. And on the night before the group makes their final push toward the unfinished bridge, anticipating Zabuza's near-certain return, Naruto quietly buries 3 of these sensors at staggered intervals around Tazuna's house, connecting each receiver to a small, shared alert box he keeps close by while everyone sleeps. If you're wondering why this matters so much, hold that thought, because it's about to become the single most important thing in this entire chapter. Deep in the night, long before dawn, the alert box gives a soft, insistent hum. Naruto, a famously deep sleeper in canon, wakes instantly. Years of sleeping lightly in a village that's never fully trusted him have left him with reflexes built for exactly this kind of moment. He checks the receiver, confirms the direction of the vibration pattern, and immediately understands. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving with deliberate, coordinated stealth, approaching from the tree line closest to the water. This isn't Tazuna's neighbors. This isn't wildlife. This is a threat. Naruto wakes Kakashi first, quiet and urgent, relaying exactly what the device detected and from which direction. Kakashi, to his enormous credit, doesn't waste a single second questioning the reliability of Naruto's invention. Months of quiet demonstrations have already earned that trust completely. How much warning do we have? Kakashi asks immediately, already reaching for his gear. Maybe 2-3 minutes, based on how fast the vibrations are getting stronger, Naruto answers, already moving to wake Sasuke and Sakura. Those 2 or 3 minutes end up mattering enormously. In canon, Gado's decision to send a group of mercenary thugs to scout and probe Tazuna's defenses ahead of the main confrontation catches the group with comparatively little warning. Here, thanks to Naruto's buried sensors, Team 7 is fully awake, armed, and positioned defensively well before the mercenaries even reach the house. The skirmish that follows is brief and almost anticlimactic precisely because of that advantage. A handful of Gado's hired thugs, expecting an easy, unprotected target, instead find themselves walking straight into a fully alert, fully prepared shinobi team. Kakashi handles the bulk of the fighting himself, quick and efficient, while Sasuke and Sakura cover Tazuna's family, and the mercenaries retreat within minutes, badly beaten and clearly unprepared for the resistance they encountered. Nobody on Team 7 is hurt. Nobody in Tazuna's household is hurt. And as the adrenaline fades and the group regroups in the aftermath, Kakashi turns to Naruto with an expression that's not quite surprise, not quite pride, but something adjacent to both. That device just saved every single person in this house, Kakashi says quietly. Once the others have gone back inside to check on a shaken but unharmed Inari and Tsunami. Do you understand that? Naruto, still coming down from the adrenaline of his first real use of an invention in an actual combat scenario, nods slowly. Yeah. I think I do. Good, Kakashi says. Then, after a pause, quieter, this is what I meant, back when I said your ideas were going to matter. Not someday. Now, if you've been waiting this whole series for the moment Naruto's inventions stop being clever background details and start actively saving lives, this is it. This is the turning point, and it's only going to escalate from here. The final confrontation at the bridge unfolds close to the shape you remember from canon, Zabuza's return alongside Haku, the thick mist rolling in. Kakashi's grim readiness to face a Jonin-level opponent for the second time. Gato's arrival at the very end with his small army of hired thugs. The ultimate betrayal that reveals he never intended to pay Zabuza for services rendered in the first place. We're going to walk through this fight a little differently than we did the earlier confrontation, because this time, Naruto's contributions are front and center rather than quietly observational. When Haku engages Sasuke and Naruto together, trapping them in that iconic dome of ice mirrors, one of the most visually striking techniques in the entire early series, Ken and Naruto struggles, overwhelmed and outmatched, relying mostly on sheer stubbornness and Sasuke's growing Sharingan to eventually turn the tide. Here, trapped inside that shimmering dome of mirrored ice, Naruto's mind does what it always does under pressure. It starts cataloging reflection angles, the consistency of Haku's speed across each mirror, the brief, almost imperceptible half-second delay every time Haku's form fully solidifies within a new mirror before launching an attack, a delay Naruto clocks almost instantly, the same way he clocked the Demon Brothers' chain rotation gap back in Chapter 3. It's not enough to win the fight outright. Haku's speed and skill are still genuinely, dangerously superior to two Genin's combined combat ability, and this story isn't interested in cheaply undercutting that. But it is enough for Naruto to start calling out warnings to Sasuke in the brief windows between attacks, helping his teammate anticipate strikes a fraction of a second sooner than he otherwise would have. Small advantages. Marginal improvements. But in a fight this fast and this dangerous, marginal improvements are often the difference between getting hit and not. There's a gap, Naruto gasps out between labored breaths, dodging another needle strike by a hair's width. Right after each mirror lights up, there's a half-second before he can actually attack from it. Watch the mirror, not him. Sasuke, already pushed to his limits and burning through his Sharingan's tracking ability just to keep pace, doesn't have breath to spare for a real response, but the slight, almost imperceptible shift in his stance afterward suggests he's heard, and he's using it. The fight resolves essentially the way canon presents it. Sasuke's growing mastery of the Sharingan eventually allowing him to predict and counter Haku's movements, the devastating, tragic climax where Haku throws himself in front of Kakashi's Chidori to protect Zabuza, sacrificing himself in the process. This is one of the most emotionally significant moments in the entire early series, and it deserves to land with its full weight, so we're not going to undercut it with any last-minute technological save. Some moments in this story need to hurt exactly as much as they always have. Zabuza's own devastating grief and fury at Haku's death, his brutal, desperate assault against Gato's mercenaries once the true depths of Gato's betrayal become clear, his final, dying moments crawling through the snow toward Haku's body, all of this plays out with the same emotional weight as the original story. Naruto's genius doesn't rewrite grief. It doesn't undo loss. That's important. And it's something this series is going to keep coming back to, again and again, as the chapters go on. Intelligence solves problems, but it doesn't erase consequences, and it definitely doesn't erase pain. In the aftermath, Gato's mercenary forces routed by the arrival of Wave Country's own villagers, newly emboldened by Inari's tearful, furious refusal to stay hidden any longer, the bridge construction finally able to resume without the constant threat of Gato's tyranny hanging over it. There's a quiet scene worth lingering on. Tazuna, standing on his unfinished bridge, looks out over his exhausted, grieving, but finally free village, and turns to the genin who made all of this possible. We're going to need help rebuilding, he says, addressing the group but looking, notably, at Naruto specifically. Not just the bridge. The village. The wells, the mills, the roads. Gato let everything fall apart for years. Naruto's eyes widen slightly, already turning that statement over in his overclocked mind, already sketching half-formed possibilities. A whole village, in need of exactly the kind of infrastructure his inventions are built for. He starts, before Kakashi's hand settles firmly on his shoulder. We'll talk about what's possible, Kakashi says, calm but deliberate, through the proper channels, once we're back in Konoha. He glances meaningfully at Naruto. This isn't something you handle alone, understand? Naruto nods, a little reluctantly, but the excitement in his eyes doesn't fully fade, because for the first time, an entire village, not just one tired mother struggling with a well, but an entire community, has directly, openly asked for the kind of help only his strange, hidden genius can provide. If you've been waiting for the moment this story starts hinting at something much bigger than one boy's secret workshop, something closer to actual infrastructure, actual civilization-changing technology, this is exactly that moment. Wave Country isn't just the site of Naruto's first real combat test. It's about to become the first place in the entire elemental nations to directly benefit from an entirely new kind of shinobi innovation. The bridge is completed not long after, and in a quiet, moving little ceremony, the villagers decide to name it the Great Naruto Bridge, a small, sincere gesture of gratitude for a genin who, in their eyes, embodied exactly the kind of stubborn, unstoppable hope their village desperately needed. Naruto, typically, is embarrassed and delighted in equal measure by the honor, though he has no idea, not yet, just how much more his name is going to end up attached to. In the years still ahead of this story, let's talk about what's been happening in Naruto's workshop during the relatively quiet weeks between Wave Country and the exams, because it matters a lot for what's coming. Kakashi, true to his word about proper channels, has quietly begun facilitating a small, careful process of introducing Naruto's inventions to a very limited circle of trusted people, rather than letting them stay entirely hidden or, worse, get exposed all at once in some uncontrolled way. It starts small, a private conversation with the third Hokage himself, framed carefully by Kakashi as a talented genin with an unusual aptitude for fuinjutsu innovation, rather than the full, staggering truth of what Naruto's actually capable of. Hiruzen Sarutobi, no fool, and someone who's spent decades watching over Naruto from a careful distance out of guilt and responsibility, listens to Kakashi's careful framing with the calm, measured patience of a man who's heard a lot of surprising things in his long life. When Kakashi finally shows him the seismic sensor device, the same one that saved Team 7's lives in Wave Country, the old Hokage turns it over in his weathered hands for a long, quiet moment. "You built this," Hiruzen says, when Naruto's finally brought in to explain it himself, hands twisting nervously behind his back in a way that makes him look, for a moment, exactly like the lonely, uncertain child he was for so many years. "Yes, sir," Naruto says. "And the water pump in Wave Country? And the light-producing device Kakashi mentioned?" "Yes, sir." Hiruzen studies him for a long moment, the same searching, careful look he's given Naruto many times over the years, though this time it's weighted with something new. Not just concern for a lonely Jinchuriki. Genuine, startled curiosity about what this boy actually represents. "Do you understand," the old Hokage says slowly, "what it means for a shinobi village to suddenly possess working technology that doesn't require years of chakra training to operate?" "Kakashi-sensei already explained that part," Naruto admits. "Who benefits? Who could weaponize it? I've been trying to think about that with everything I build now." Something in Hiruzen's expression softens at that, a flicker of quiet, weary relief, like a man who's been bracing for the worst and just found out things might actually turn out okay. "Good," he says. "That's exactly the right instinct." He's quiet for another moment, considering. "For now, this stays contained. A small circle. Myself, Kakashi, and eventually, when the time is right, a few specialists I trust completely. You are not ready for the whole village to know what you can do, and frankly, either is the village. It's not full acceptance. It's not the grand reveal you might expect from a story like this, but it's the first time an authority figure in Naruto's life has looked at his genius and responded not with fear, not with exploitation, but with careful, deliberate protection. If you've ever had someone in a position of power actually choose to shield you instead of use you, you know how rare and important that moment is. And it's going to matter enormously for how this story unfolds from here. With that quiet blessing, limited as it is, Naruto's workshop starts to change in a small but significant way. He's no longer working entirely alone. Once every week or so, always late at night, always carefully arranged to avoid drawing attention, a specific figure starts visiting Naruto's apartment, an aging, semi-retired seal master named Ebisu's old mentor, a minor character we'll call in these notes simply the old seal master, brought in quietly by the Hokage specifically because of his long-standing discretion and his genuine, old-fashioned love of fuinjutsu theory for its own sake, rather than for political or military application. He's skeptical at first, expecting to find an overeager genin fumbling through half-understood theory. What he finds instead, laid out across Naruto's cramped floorboard workshop, is enough to leave the old man genuinely speechless for the first time in longer than he can remember. Where, he asks, voice tight with something between disbelief and reverence, did you learn resonance-tuned transmission arrays? This is theoretical work. Nobody's built a stable version of this in generations. I found some old scrolls, Naruto says, the same careful half-truth he's given everyone so far. Figured out the rest myself. The old seal master doesn't push for more detail. He doesn't need to. What matters to him, sitting there in that cramped little workshop, is the sheer scale of untapped potential in front of him, and from that night forward, he becomes something between a tutor and a genuinely odd colleague, helping Naruto refine techniques that used to take weeks of trial and error into processes that now take days. This matters a lot going forward, because it means Naruto's inventions are about to start improving at a rate even his own overclocked mind couldn't manage entirely alone. And with the Chunin exams looming, that acceleration is about to become extremely relevant. Let's turn to the exams themselves now, because you already know how this begins. Kakashi nominates Team 7, somewhat to Sakura's visible anxiety and Sasuke's quiet, intense focus, and the three genin find themselves standing in front of the academy building where the first stage of the exams will take place. The written exam, Ibiki Marino's infamous psychological test disguised as an impossible academic challenge, unfolds almost exactly the way canon presents it. 9 genuinely unsolvable questions designed less to test knowledge and more to test whether genin can gather information under pressure without getting caught, followed by the 10th question's brutal ultimatum about giving up entirely. Except this time, there's a problem for Ibiki, and it's a problem entirely of Naruto's own making. For years, Naruto's carefully maintained his class clown, dead last persona specifically through deliberate, controlled underperformance on written exams, a skill he's had to hone with genuine precision, because failing convincingly when you actually understand the material perfectly is, as we discussed all the way back in Chapter 1, a surprisingly difficult thing to fake consistently. But Ibiki's test isn't a normal academic exam. It's not testing whether you know the material. The questions are deliberately unsolvable by design. It's testing whether you're clever enough to cheat successfully, whether you can gather answers from more skilled neighbors without getting caught, and whether you have the resolve to accept the risk of the 10th question's ultimatum. And this, it turns out, is exactly the kind of test Naruto's mind was built for. Within the first few minutes, while other genin are hunched over their papers, sweating, desperately trying to work out impossible questions through legitimate reasoning, Naruto's already identified 3 separate viable cheating vectors just by watching the proctor's patrol patterns around the room, the subtle blind spots in their sightlines, the rhythm of their rotation through the rows of desks, the precise timing windows where a genin skilled enough could glance at a neighbor's paper undetected. He doesn't act on all of it. That would draw exactly the kind of attention he's spent years avoiding. But he does, carefully, deliberately, choose to answer 3 of the 9 questions completely correctly using actual, legitimate reasoning, while appearing to guess or leave the rest blank, all timed precisely around the proctor's movement patterns so it looks like nothing more than a lucky guess here and there rather than a systematic effort. Ibiki Marino, watching from the front of the room with the sharp, practiced eye of a career interrogation specialist, notices something slightly off about Naruto Uzumaki's paper almost immediately. 3 genuinely correct, sophisticated answers scattered among mostly blank spaces, timed in a pattern that looks almost too clean to be coincidence. He doesn't say anything during the exam itself. Ibiki's job isn't to call out suspicious behavior in real time, it's to observe and evaluate. But he makes a very particular note in his private evaluation records that night, one that's going to matter later. Uzumaki, Naruto, irregular performance pattern, possible information gathering skills significantly beyond genin baseline. Recommend flagging for further observation. If you're the kind of person who loves watching a careful mask slowly slip without the wearer even fully realizing it, that's exactly what's happening here. Naruto thinks he's being careful. He is being careful, by his own standards. But every single careful, deliberate choice he makes leaves a trail, however faint, for anyone paying close enough attention. And there's about to be a lot more people paying close attention very soon. The 10th question arrives exactly as canon presents it, Ibiki's brutal ultimatum about the permanent consequences of giving up, the tension in the room as genin after genin, terrified of failing their entire shinobi career on the spot, choose to withdraw rather than risk the stakes Ibiki describes. And Naruto's response, when his own turn comes, plays out almost exactly like the original story, his passionate, defiant refusal to back down, his declaration that he'll become Hokage no matter what obstacles stand in his way, the speech that ends up inspiring the rest of the room to hold their ground as well. This moment doesn't need rewriting. It's one of the most beloved scenes in the entire early series for a reason, and Naruto's genius doesn't change the fact that, underneath all his careful masking and hidden brilliance, he genuinely means every word of that declaration. Intelligence and heart aren't opposites in this story. They're the same boy, wearing different faces depending on who's watching. Ibiki passes the remaining genin, the true nature of the 10th question revealed as a test of resolve rather than knowledge, and Enko Mitarashi crashes through the window moments later to introduce the exam's second stage exactly as canon dictates. But that evaluation note about Naruto's irregular performance pattern doesn't just disappear. It gets filed, and filed reports, in a village as thorough as Konoha, have a way of eventually finding their way to people who know exactly what to do with them. The Forest of Death arc unfolds close to canon's shape, the 5-day survival test, the need to collect both a heaven and an earth scroll from rival teams, the genuinely dangerous, hostile environment of a forest crawling with venomous wildlife and cutthroat competition between genin squads all desperate to advance. This is where Naruto's inventions finally get their first real test in a large-scale, unpredictable combat scenario, and it's a big one. On the first night in the forest, once Team 7 finds a defensible position to rest, Naruto quietly sets to work on something he's been quietly refining ever since the seismic sensors proved themselves in Wave Country, a portable, lightweight version of that same detection technology, adapted specifically for the dense, chaotic terrain of the forest. Instead of simple vibration detection alone, this version, built with real, meaningful help from the old SEAL Master's tutoring over the preceding weeks, incorporates a rudimentary chakra signature filter, allowing it to distinguish, at least roughly, between the ambient background chakra of wildlife and the more concentrated, controlled signatures typical of Shinobi actively moving through the area. If you're the kind of viewer who likes when a story shows its work instead of just hand-waving a convenient upgrade, that filter didn't come from nowhere. It's a direct result of weeks of legitimate tutoring, careful iteration, and Naruto's own relentless drive to refine every single thing he builds. Genius doesn't mean nothing takes effort in this story. It means the effort produces results a lot faster than it would for anyone else. Naruto weaves this new detection network into the immediate perimeter around Team 7's resting position, using thin, nearly invisible strands of chakra-conductive wire strung between low branches, connected to a small receiver he keeps clipped to his own vest for immediate feedback. It ends up mattering almost immediately. Deep into the second night, the receiver gives off a subtle, distinct pulse pattern, one Naruto's begun to recognize as consistent with multiple shinobi moving in deliberate, coordinated formation, rather than the more chaotic patterns typical of the forest's dangerous wildlife. "We've got company," Naruto murmurs, waking Sasuke and Sakura with quiet urgency. Coordinated movement, probably a full squad, closing from the east. Sasuke, initially skeptical of relying on some device instead of his own instincts, still moves to ready himself. Years of grudging trust in Naruto's strange abilities from Wave Country outweighing his natural skepticism. Sakura, for her part, has stopped questioning Naruto's inventions entirely at this point. The water pump, the sensors in Wave Country, this newest device. There's simply too much accumulated evidence now that whatever Naruto's doing, it works. The rival team turns out to be a group of Rain-affiliated genin, opportunistic and aggressive, hoping to catch Team 7 off guard while they rested. Instead, thanks to the early warning, Team 7 meets them fully prepared, and the resulting skirmish, while still genuinely dangerous, still a real fight with real risk, ends decisively in Team 7's favor, with the Rain genin retreating after losing their Earth scroll in the exchange. It's a small, contained moment in the grand scope of the exam, but it's an important one, because for the first time, Naruto's genius has directly, unambiguously given his team a decisive tactical advantage in front of both Sasuke and Sakura, without any of the previous careful ambiguity about maybe it's luck, or maybe he's just been training secretly. Sasuke, examining the confiscated Earth scroll afterward, glances at Naruto with an expression that's harder to read than usual. Not quite respect, not quite suspicion. Something uneasily caught between the two. That thing, Sasuke says finally, nodding at the small receiver still clipped to Naruto's vest. How long have you had tech like that? Naruto hesitates, weighing exactly how much truth this moment calls for. A while, he settles on finally. I'll explain properly someday. Just, not today, okay? Sasuke studies him for a long moment, then, surprisingly, just nods and lets it go. Fine. But you're going to have to explain eventually. If you've been waiting for the moment Naruto's own teammates start actively, openly acknowledging that something bigger is going on, this is exactly that moment. The mask isn't gone yet, but everyone around him is starting to see the cracks, and Naruto himself is starting to realize just how unsustainable the hiding is about to become. The rest of the Forest of Death plays out close to canon structure. Orochimaru's terrifying, disguised infiltration as a Grasnin, the horrifying confrontation that leaves Sasuke marked with the curse seal, the desperate scramble to survive and eventually secure both scrolls needed to advance. This is a moment where we're keeping things extremely close to the original story, because Orochimaru's role here is pivotal for everything still to come in this arc, and cheapening the horror or stakes of that confrontation with a last-minute invention save would undercut the entire emotional weight of what happens to Sasuke. But there is one important addition worth discussing, because it's going to matter a great deal for the chapters ahead. During the chaos of Orochimaru's attack, after the horrifying reveal of his true identity, after Sasuke's desperate, doomed attempt to fight back, after the curse seal is forced onto his neck and Orochimaru vanishes into the forest, satisfied with having planted his hook, Naruto, reeling with fear and fury in equal measure, does something canon Naruto never quite gets the chance to do in this exact moment. He studies the bite mark. Even in the aftermath, exhausted, terrified for his unconscious teammate, some part of Naruto's overclocked mind can't stop cataloging details. The same instinct that's driven him since he was 4 years old staring at ripples in a puddle. The seal Orochimaru left behind on Sasuke's neck isn't like any Fuinjutsu pattern Naruto's encountered in his own research. Organic, almost parasitic in its structure, clearly designed to interface directly with a person's own chakra network rather than sitting as an external tool the way his own storage seals do. He doesn't understand it. Not yet. This is far beyond anything even his own considerable expertise has touched so far. But he memorizes every detail he can see of that mark before Sakura, in a panic, insists they need to move Sasuke to safety immediately. It's a small, quiet detail in the chaos of a much bigger, more dangerous scene. But if you've been following this series closely, you already know that nothing Naruto observes ever really goes to waste. That memorized seal pattern is going to resurface, later, in a much bigger way, once this story reaches its confrontation with Orochimaru's deeper plans. Team 7 survives the Forest of Death, securing both scrolls needed to advance despite the trauma of Orochimaru's attack, and Sasuke, badly shaken and now carrying a curse mark he doesn't yet understand, is brought before the preliminary round of matches alongside the other surviving Genin teams. The preliminary matches unfold largely the way canon presents them. A rapid series of one-on-one bouts meant to trim down the large pool of surviving Genin before the main tournament stage. Several of the matches you remember happen essentially unchanged. Sasuke's tense, curse-mark-suppressed victory against Yoroi, Shikamaru's clever, effort-minimizing win against Kin, Rock Lee's explosive, tragic fight against Gaara that ends with devastating injuries neither this story nor the original ever shies away from. Naruto's own match plays out close to canon too. His fight against Kiba, full of the same brash, stubborn energy you remember, ending in a victory that owes more to raw determination and clever improvisation than to any of his hidden inventions. This is important groundwork, actually, because it's a deliberate choice on Naruto's part, in a public arena, in front of Konoha's entire shinobi population and foreign dignitaries from every allied village. This is exactly the wrong moment to reveal anything about his workshop. He fights this match the old-fashioned way, on purpose, masking his abilities even here. But after the preliminary matches conclude and the remaining Genin are given a month to prepare for the final tournament stage, something happens that's entirely new to this version of the story. Kakashi pulls Naruto aside privately, expression more serious than usual. The third Hokage wants to meet with you again, Kakashi says quietly. Along with a few other people this time. Naruto's stomach twists slightly. What other people? Kakashi's expression softens, just slightly, in that rare way it does when he's about to deliver something meant to be reassuring rather than alarming. The Nara clan head, he says. Shikaka Nara. He's heard enough about your seismic detection work, filtered through appropriately vague channels, that he wants to discuss something he's calling computational seals with you directly. Naruto blinks. Computational what? His words, not mine, Kakashi says, the faintest hint of amusement in his tone. Apparently the idea of a seal array that can process information rather than just store or transmit chakra has him very interested. He's been quietly working on strategic planning theory for years, and from what he's heard, your work might intersect with some of his own thinking in ways either of you have fully explored yet. If you've read enough of these kinds of what-if stories to catch a pattern developing, this is exactly the kind of moment that's meant to make your ears perk up. Shikaku Nara, head of one of Konoha's most brilliant strategic clans, a man whose entire family bloodline is built around processing information faster and more efficiently than opponents can react to it, taking a direct, personal interest in Naruto's Fuinjutsu work is not a small thing. It's the first real hint of something this series has been quietly building towards since Chapter 1. The idea that Naruto's genius isn't destined to stay contained in one boy's secret workshop forever. It's the beginning of an actual, organized effort, however small and quiet it still is right now, to bring his ideas into contact with some of the sharpest minds Konoha already has. Naruto, sitting there processing what Kakashi's just told him, feels something shift in his chest, a strange, unfamiliar mixture of excitement and nervousness that's a little hard for even his own overclocked mind to fully untangle. Okay, he says finally. When do I meet with him? Tomorrow evening, Kakashi says. Quietly. Same as always. Naruto nods, and as Kakashi turns to leave, he adds one more thing, almost as an afterthought, though the weight behind it is anything but casual. Naruto, he says, I think you should know, the timing of all this isn't a coincidence. There are already people connected to Orochimaru's plans moving through the village disguised as exam participants and dignitaries. The Hokage wants your abilities integrated into our contingency planning before the final round of the exams, not after. Naruto's breath catches slightly. You think something's going to happen during the finals? Kakashi's expression turns grim, the easy, lazy demeanor falling away entirely for just a moment. I think we'd be foolish not to prepare like it might. Let's start with the meeting Kakashi mentioned, because it matters enormously for everything that follows. Shikaku Nara turns out to be exactly what you'd expect from the head of Konoha's most brilliant strategic clan. Tired-eyed, perpetually unhurried in his movements, but sharp enough underneath that unhurried exterior to make Naruto feel, for the first time in a long while, like he's sitting across from someone who might actually be able to keep pace with his own thinking. They meet in a quiet, private room in the Hokage's tower, Hiruzen Sarutobi himself present, along with Kakashi standing watchfully near the door. Naruto lays out his seismic sensor technology in full detail for the first time to someone outside his tiny circle of trusted allies, walking Shikaka through the resonance principles. The chakra signature filtering the old seal master helped him refine the rough, scattered notes on what he's been privately calling flow lines in his own invented vocabulary. Shikaka listens without interrupting for nearly 20 straight minutes, an eternity for a man famous even among his own clan for getting bored quickly. When Naruto finally finishes, Shikaka sits back, arms crossed, considering him with an expression that's part calculation, part something almost like relief. You know what a shogi board is? Shikaka asks, apropos of nothing. Naruto blinks. The strategy game? Yeah, kind of. Every piece on that board has limited information, Shikaka says. You can only see what's directly in front of you, what's already been played. Strategy, at its core, is about compensating for that limitation, predicting what you can't directly observe. He taps the edge of the table, thoughtful. What you've built, kid, is a way to directly observe things a shinobi normally has to guess at. Troop movement. Positioning. Intent, if you filter it well enough. He pauses. Do you understand what that means for how battles get fought? Naruto's mind is already racing ahead of the question, the way it always does. It means you don't have to guess anymore. Or not as much anyway. You know where people are moving, how many, how fast, without needing eyes on them directly. Exactly, Shikaka says. That's not just a clever gadget, Naruto. That's the foundation of an entirely different way to plan a defense. He glances toward Hiruzen, which is why, given what our intelligence division's been picking up over the past several weeks, I'd like his help integrating a network of these sensors around the village's perimeter before the final exam stage begins. Quietly. Discreetly. And I'd like him personally involved in monitoring it, because from what I've seen today, nobody currently in this village understands the underlying theory well enough to run it without him. Hiruzen, who has spent years carefully protecting Naruto from exactly this kind of exposure, is quiet for a long moment, weighing the request. Finally, he nods, slow and deliberate. Approved, the old Hokage says. But quietly. This does not become public knowledge, not even within our own ranks beyond those directly involved. Is that understood? Naruto nods, already turning over the scale of what's just been asked of him. Not one sensor. Not three, buried around a client's house in Wave Country. An entire network, around an entire village, in less than a month. If you've ever been handed a project that's simultaneously the most exciting and most terrifying thing you've ever worked on, that's exactly the mixture of emotions running through Naruto's head as he leaves that meeting. And trust me, what he builds over the following weeks is about to matter more than anyone in that room, even Shikaku, fully anticipates. The next few weeks become a blur of quiet, exhausting work. Naruto spends his days training for his upcoming match against Neji, a fight he already suspects, based purely on quiet observation of Neji's fighting style during the preliminaries, is going to be genuinely difficult even with everything he's capable of. But his nights, and increasingly his early mornings too, are spent buried in the logistics of building and burying dozens of seismic sensors around Konoha's outer perimeter, working alongside a small, carefully vetted team the Hokages assigned him, a handful of Chunin-level Fuinjutsu specialists, the old SEAL master continuing his quiet mentorship, and on more than one occasion, Shikaku Nara himself, sleeves rolled up, personally helping bury sensor arrays in the dead of night. It's during these long nights that Naruto starts to realize something important about the limitations of his own original design. His seismic sensors, effective as they've been, only detect vibration and rough chakra signature filtering, useful, but crude. Easily fooled by a sufficiently careful infiltrator moving slowly enough to avoid triggering the vibration threshold, or masking their chakra signature well enough to blend into ambient background noise. If this really is preparation for an invasion, and every quiet, worried glance exchanged between Shikaku and Kakashi over those weeks makes it increasingly clear that's exactly what everyone fears, then, vibration detection alone isn't going to be enough. Konoha needs something that can pick up coordinated, large-scale movement from much further away, well before anyone gets close enough to trigger a ground-level sensor at all. This is where Naruto's earlier proto-radio work, the resonance-tuned transmission devices from Chapter 3, finally gets fused together with his seismic detection technology into something genuinely new, a layered, long-range early warning network, using resonance-paired relay stations positioned at staggered distances beyond the village's immediate perimeter, each one calibrated to detect and relay unusual concentrations of chakra movement, not individual signatures, which would be far too noisy and unreliable at range, but the broader, aggregate patterns consistent with large groups of shinobi moving together in coordinated formation. It's the single most ambitious thing Naruto's ever attempted to build, and it very nearly doesn't work in time. The old SEAL master, working alongside him through most of these final nights, more than once has to talk Naruto down from pushing through exhaustion so severe it starts affecting his precision, a real, human cost to all this genius that this story has never been shy about acknowledging. But 3 days before the final exam stage, in the dead of night, standing on a rooftop near the edge of Konoha's outer wall with Shikaku Nara at his side, Naruto activates the completed network for the first time. For a long, tense moment, nothing happens. Then, faintly, from a relay station nearly 2 kilometers outside the village, a soft, steady pulse comes back, not an alert, not yet, just confirmation that the resonance link is holding stable across that distance. Shikaku lets out a breath Naruto didn't even realize he'd been holding alongside him. "It's working," he says quietly, something like genuine awe creeping into his usually flat, unbothered tone. 2 kilometers, stable resonance, real-time relay. He shakes his head slowly. Kid, I don't think you understand what you've just built. I think I understand pretty well, actually, Naruto says, exhausted but grinning despite himself. You've built the beginning of an early warning system that no other village in the elemental nations has anything remotely close to, Shikaka says, quiet and serious now. That's not an exaggeration. That's a genuine fact you need to sit with. If you've been following this series long enough to see where this is heading, this exact moment, right here, is the first real proof that Naruto's inventions have graduated from clever tools that help his own team into strategic infrastructure that changes the balance of power for an entire hidden village. And it could not be arriving at a more critical moment, because 3 days later, the final stage of the Chunin exams begins. The final exam matches unfold largely the way canon presents them, and we're not going to rush past this section entirely, because several of these fights matter enormously for characters this story cares about just as much as the original does. Naruto's match against Neji Hyuga plays out close to the emotional core of the original scene. Neji's bitter, fatalistic philosophy about fate and bloodline destiny, his cold dismissal of Naruto as a hopeless failure incapable of overcoming his own limitations. Naruto's response, when the fight actually begins, mixes his usual stubborn refusal to accept defeat with something new this story has been building since Chapter 1, quiet, careful observation of Neji's Byakugan-enhanced fighting style, cataloging the subtle tells in Neji's stance that hint at blind spots even the all-seeing Byakugan can't fully eliminate. It's still a genuinely difficult fight. Neji's skill and bloodline advantage are real. And this story has never been interested in making Naruto invincible just because his mind operates on another level entirely. But the victory, when it comes, lands with a little more precision and a little less desperate, chaotic luck than canon's version. Naruto's calculated exploitation of a specific gap in Neji's rotational defense technique, proving the deciding factor rather than a last-second surge of raw determination alone. The crowd's reaction plays out close to canon too. Muted surprise rippling through the stands, Hinata Hyuga's quiet, overwhelmed relief and admiration watching from the sidelines, Neji's own grudging, confused re-evaluation of a boy he dismissed as hopeless, Gaara's terrifying, one-sided demolition of his own opponent proceeds essentially unchanged, the same unsettling, bloodthirsty menace radiating off him that canon's version carries so effectively. And it's here, watching Gaara's fight from the sidelines, that Naruto's cataloging mind kicks into a very different gear, not tactical this time, but something closer to genuine, uneasy recognition. That's not just brutality, Naruto thinks, watching Gaara's sand move with eerie, almost sentient precision. That's someone using an ability so completely he's forgotten how to exist without it. That's what happens when you're isolated with something dangerous long enough. He doesn't say this thought out loud to anyone. But if you've been paying attention to this series' recurring themes about isolation, hidden power, and the loneliness of carrying something the rest of the world fears, you already understand exactly why this particular observation lands so heavily on Naruto in this moment. And then, in the middle of Sasuke's delayed match against Gaara, the moment canon uses to finally spring its trap, the invasion begins. Except this time, it doesn't begin the way it does in the original story. In canon, the invasion's opening move is a surprise, genjutsu descending over the stadium to disguise the initial infiltration. Suna and Oto forces already deep into their positions before anyone in the crowd fully realizes what's happening. The third Hokage himself only becomes aware something's deeply wrong moments before the fighting actually starts. Here, thanks to Naruto's early warning network, quietly monitored around the clock by a small rotating team since its completion 3 days earlier, the aggregate chakra movement sensors detect something drastically wrong nearly 40 full minutes before the invasion's opening genjutsu even descends over the stadium. A relay technician monitoring the network late that morning, one of the Chunin specialists assigned to help Naruto during construction, notices an unmistakable, growing spike in aggregate chakra movement approaching from multiple directions simultaneously, consistent with coordinated large-scale troop movement rather than any normal civilian or merchant traffic. The pattern is unlike anything the network's picked up in the weeks since it went live. The report reaches Shikaku Nara within minutes. Shikaku, understanding immediately what he's looking at, moves just as fast, alerting the Hokage's personal guard and quietly, carefully beginning to mobilize additional shinobi forces well before the stadium crowd has any idea anything's wrong at all. If you've ever wondered what 40 extra minutes of warning could actually mean in a crisis like this, let's walk through it, because the difference ends up being enormous. In canon, the initial genjutsu catches Konoha's forces almost entirely by surprise, and much of the early invasion unfolds as a desperate, reactive scramble, Jonin and Chunin forced to improvise defensive positions in real time while civilians panic and scatter with minimal guidance. Here, thanks to that warning window, Anbu and Jonin reinforcements are already quietly, subtly repositioning around key defensive points throughout the village well before the stadium genjutsu descends. Evacuation routes for civilians are quietly, discreetly staffed and ready. The Hokage's personal guard is already fully alert and positioned, rather than being caught flat-footed by the initial chaos. It's not a perfect defense. This story has no interest in pretending 40 minutes of warning somehow neutralizes an entire coordinated invasion by two hidden villages. Suna and Oto forces still breach the village. Fighting still breaks out across multiple fronts. Civilians are still hurt, buildings still damaged, the overall chaos and danger of the invasion still very real. But the difference between reactive scramble and prepared defense turns out to matter enormously for how many lives are ultimately at stake. Let's focus in on the confrontation that matters most, though, because it's the emotional and narrative core of this entire chapter, the fight between the third Hokage and Orochimaru. In canon, this fight is one of the most devastating, bittersweet moments in the entire early series. Hiruzen Sarutobi, elderly, past his physical prime, forced into a desperate, sacrificial battle against his own former student, ultimately dying in the process of sealing away Orochimaru's arms and preventing him from ever using certain forbidden techniques again. It's a genuinely tragic scene, one this story has no intention of erasing or cheapening, but it does play out a little differently here, because of one specific thing Naruto did weeks earlier that the original story never had reason to include. Remember, back during the final weeks of preparation, when Naruto was building his long-range early warning network alongside Shikaku and the old Seal Master? During that same period, at Kakashi's specific, quiet suggestion, Naruto also spent several late nights working on something smaller, more personal, a set of portable, single-use barrier reinforcement seals, designed using the same resonance and containment principles as his storage seal battery work, intended specifically as an emergency defensive measure for high-value individuals in the event of a large-scale attack. Kakashi's reasoning, when he first suggested it, was simple and grounded in exactly the kind of protective instinct he's carried for Naruto since Chapter 2. If something like an invasion really does happen, the Hokage's going to be a primary target. Anything that gives him even a little extra protection is worth having ready. Naruto built 3 of these seals in the end, small, folded slips of specially treated paper, each capable of generating a brief, powerful chakra-reinforced barrier when activated, strong enough to absorb or deflect a single devastating attack before dissolving entirely. He gave one to Kakashi. He gave one to Shikaku, and, at Kakashi's insistence, delivered the third quietly, personally, to the Hokage himself just 2 days before the exam's final stage, with a short, slightly awkward explanation about how it worked. Hiruzen, touched by the gesture more than he let on at the time, tucked the seal into his robes and thanked Naruto with the same warm, grandfatherly smile he's given him countless times over the years. He's still carrying it when Orochimaru springs his trap. The fight itself unfolds close to Kanen's devastating shape, Orochimaru's 4 violet flames formation trapping Hiruzen and forcing him into an isolated barrier. The summoning of the first and second Hokage's reanimated corpses through forbidden Edo Tensei technique. The horrifying spectacle of Hiruzen forced to fight against the very predecessors he idolized and served under. This story isn't interested in undoing that horror, or in giving Hiruzen some cheap, invention-powered victory that erases the weight of what this fight is supposed to represent. Orochimaru is still Orochimaru, brilliant, monstrous, decades more experienced and considerably more dangerous than almost anyone else in the elemental nations. The reanimated Hokages are still a genuinely devastating weapon against him, forcing Hiruzen into increasingly desperate territory as the fight wears on. But at the critical moment, the point in canon where Hiruzen, badly wounded and running out of options, finally commits to the forbidden sealing technique that will cost him his own life to defeat Orochimaru once and for all, there's a difference. In canon, Hiruzen enters that final technique already gravely injured, his body pushed to its absolute limit by the accumulated damage of the fight. Here, at a crucial earlier moment in the battle, a devastating strike from one of the reanimated Hokages that, in the original story, connects solidly and does serious damage. Hiruzen, instinct honed by decades of combat experience, activates the small barrier seal Naruto gave him just 2 days before. The seal flares to life for barely half a second, just long enough to absorb the worst of that single devastating impact, deflecting enough of the force that Hiruzen, while still hurt, still exhausted, still facing an opponent far more monstrous than any single old man should have to face alone, isn't quite as critically weakened heading into the fight's final, decisive stretch. It's a small difference. It doesn't change the fundamental outcome. Hiruzen still ultimately commits to the same forbidden sealing technique, still pays the same devastating, permanent price for using it, still succeeds in sealing away Orochimaru's arms and ending the immediate threat at tremendous personal cost. But because he enters that final, fatal technique with slightly more physical reserve than Kanon's version, slightly less accumulated damage weighing him down, Hiruzen survives the immediate aftermath of the sealing, badly, permanently wounded, his body clearly failing, but alive, breathing, conscious enough to be found and stabilized by medical teams rushing to the scene once the immediate fighting dies down. If you've read this far into the series expecting us to simply undo Hiruzen's death for a cheap emotional win, that's not quite what's happening here, and it's worth taking a moment to explain why, because it matters for the kind of story we're telling. This isn't about erasing consequences. Hiruzen is gravely, permanently injured. His body has paid a devastating price for that forbidden technique, and he's not walking away from this fight unscathed, or even close to it. What's different is a matter of degree, not outcome, a small, specific piece of Naruto's careful, protective preparation buying just enough of a margin to turn died in that arena into barely, painfully survived, with a long and uncertain road ahead. That distinction is going to matter enormously for the political and emotional shape of the chapters still to come. Orochimaru, forced to retreat once his invasion's true objective, Hiruzen's death and the resulting chaos, fails to fully materialize, withdraws alongside the remaining sound and sand forces, the invasion grinding to a halt as soon as forces, uneasy about the true cost of their alliance with Orochimaru, and increasingly aware of how much more prepared Konoha proved to be than expected, begin their own retreat shortly after. The overall cost of the invasion, thanks to that 40-minute warning window and the quiet, careful defensive preparations it allowed, ends up significantly reduced compared to Kanon. Fewer civilian casualties, fewer destroyed buildings, fewer shinobi lost defending key positions that, in the original story, were caught almost entirely by surprise. It's not a bloodless victory. This story has no interest in pretending an invasion by 2 hidden villages could ever be truly costless. Konoha still mourns real losses in the aftermath. The village is still shaken, still scarred by the violation of its own walls. But it is, unmistakably, a far less devastating outcome than what Kanon's version of this arc puts the village through, and everyone who understands why, from Shikaku Nara to Kakashi to the small circle of shinobi who helped build and monitor that early warning network, knows exactly whose quiet, obsessive genius made that difference possible. In the aftermath, as Konoha begins the long, difficult process of rebuilding and recovering, and as Hiruzen, gravely wounded but alive, resting under careful medical supervision, slowly, painfully begins his recovery, the village council convenes an emergency session to address exactly how the invasion was detected so far in advance. Shikaku Nara, standing before the assembled council members, lays out the full scope of what happened as plainly and directly as he can. The early warning network. The 40-minute margin. The barrier seal that may well have been the difference between the third Hokage's death and his survival. And when one particularly skeptical council elder demands to know exactly who developed technology this sophisticated, this consequential, without the council's prior knowledge or approval, Shikaku doesn't hesitate. Naruto Uzumaki, he says simply. A genin under Kakashi Hataki's team. And before anyone in this room says anything else, understand this. Whatever assumptions you've been operating under about that boy, they're wrong. And they've been wrong for a very long time. The room goes very quiet. If you've been with this series since Chapter 1, since a lonely 4-year-old boy sat on a crate, watching ripples in a puddle, deciding to hide exactly how different he really was, you already understand the enormous weight of this exact moment. This is the beginning of the end of Naruto's hiding, not because he chose to reveal himself, but because his own genius, deployed in the defense of the village he's always loved despite everything it's put him through, has finally become too consequential, too undeniably significant, for the truth to stay contained any longer. The Council's reaction to that revelation, and what it means for how Konoha treats its most brilliant, most misunderstood genin going forward, is going to shape everything that happens next. That's where we're going to leave things for today. Orochimaru's invasion has been repelled at a fraction of its intended cost. The third Hokage survives, barely, thanks to a gift built in secret weeks earlier, and Konoha's council now knows, in explicit terms, exactly who's been quietly reshaping the village's defenses from the shadows. If you want to see what happens when Naruto's secret finally, fully comes into the light, and how the village council, the elders, and Naruto's own teammates react to the truth, that's coming up in Chapter 7. Make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell on, because trust me, the next chapter is where everything changes for good. I'll see you in the next chapter.